Hey, amazing viewers, I love connecting with you all around the world. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will leave you inspired and ready to take control of your own life. In today's story, you'll hear about an incredible twist that no one saw coming. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. It was an ordinary autumn morning at an international airport. The hustle and bustle of passengers rushing to catch their flights filled the air. But in the middle of it all, a moment unfolded that would not just change one officer's career, it would also expose a moment of unspoken prejudice that many hoped had disappeared in this day and age. Vanessa Williams, a poised and confident Harvard-educated attorney, philanthropist, and humanitarian, had just arrived at the airport for a flight to Sudan. She was on a mission that would save countless lives. In her carry-on bag, carefully packed, were vital medical supplies, antibiotics, vaccines, and specialized equipment meant for the children in refugee camps. But to Officer Reynolds, standing in his uniform with his badge gleaming under the harsh airport lights, none of that mattered. Vanessa moved towards the first-class line with a quiet grace, as she had done countless times before. The agent behind the counter, with a brief flicker of doubt in his eyes, checked her ticket. "First class to Paris?" he asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. Vanessa nodded politely, assured in her right to be there. Yet that brief interaction would set the stage for something far worse, something she was not prepared for. The line at security grew long, passengers shuffling toward their respective lanes. As Vanessa approached the expedited lane for first-class passengers, Officer Reynolds stepped in front of her without hesitation, his tone authoritative. "Regular screening is that way," he said, pointing sharply toward the longer line. Vanessa, not one to back down from confrontation, calmly responded, "I have priority access. My boarding pass clearly states that." Reynolds didn't even glance at her ticket. His eyes, already judgmental, locked onto her with a superiority that made Vanessa uneasy. "We need to verify that," he muttered, stepping forward. The request felt unnecessary, as every other passenger with a first-class ticket had passed through without this added scrutiny. Vanessa didn't flinch. She stood her ground, her voice composed but firm. "I've already been allowed through by others with the same ticket. Why the additional verification?" she asked, as a small crowd started to form behind her, watching the interaction with curiosity. Reynolds was undeterred, dismissing her concerns with a wave of his hand. "I decide what's relevant here, not you," he retorted, his tone growing more dismissive. It was then that Vanessa's instincts kicked in. This wasn't about security protocols. It was something else, and she was about to find out just how deep this officer's prejudices ran. A woman standing nearby, noticing the tension, took out her phone to record the interaction. The whole scene began to feel like a spectacle, the public humiliation of one woman by an officer who didn't see her for who she was, a humanitarian, a professional, a wife, but instead someone who he thought didn't belong. As the minutes passed, the pressure mounted. Officer Reynolds' behavior was becoming more aggressive, almost as if he needed to make an example out of her. But Vanessa didn't back down. She knew that this wasn't just a random act of oversight. It was the type of prejudice that quietly fueled a system many believed was beyond it. She had been mistaken for someone who didn't belong, simply because of the color of her skin. "Officer," Vanessa said calmly but with a firmness that caught him off guard, "you're making a mistake. This will be a regret you'll carry for a long time." The officer's laugh was cold, dismissive, but Vanessa's words would echo in his mind. And soon, he'd realize just how wrong he was, and just how deep his error would cut, not just for her, but for himself as well. This was only the beginning. The situation was about to escalate, and what happened next would leave everyone at the airport stunned, especially Officer Reynolds. But the bigger story wasn't just about one officer's misguided actions. It was about a system that had failed to see the humanity in a woman who was fighting for the very lives of others. The air in the airport terminal grew thick with tension, But Vanessa Williams stood like a beacon of grace amidst it all. Her calmness, in stark contrast to the rising hostility around her, was both unnerving and inspiring to those watching. Officer Reynolds, clearly caught in a power struggle he didn't understand, seemed to grow more irritated with every word Vanessa spoke. "Step aside, ma'am," Reynolds ordered once again, his voice now tinged with authority, as if his pride was on the line. Vanessa held her ground, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not stepping aside. I've done nothing wrong. You're treating me unfairly, and I'm asking for the same treatment every other first-class passenger has received today." Her words, simple and clear, cut through the noise of the bustling terminal. The crowd around her began to murmur. A few passengers had already begun to record the exchange, silently capturing every moment as it unfolded. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something bigger, something that transcended a single individual. It was about equality, fairness, and standing up against the quiet prejudices that often went unnoticed. Reynolds, his face now flushed with frustration, stepped closer, his body language more aggressive. "You need to stop being difficult. I'm just doing my job." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, but she kept her composure. "Your job is to ensure the safety of passengers, not to decide who belongs and who doesn't. And you're not doing your job right now." The officer's grip tightened on his authority, as if trying to force Vanessa into submission. But it wasn't working. He had miscalculated. She wasn't just a woman standing in front of him. She was someone who had spent her life fighting for justice, someone who had walked into rooms that others told her she didn't belong in. This wasn't the first time she had faced adversity. But this time, the stakes were different. This time, the prejudices weren't just against her. They were against the ideals she represented. A voice interrupted the escalating tension. "Is there a problem here, Officer Reynolds?" A woman approached, wearing a supervisor's badge. It was Karen Matthews, the terminal operations supervisor. Reynolds, still confident in his position, straightened up. "No problem. Just a routine screening. She's causing a disruption." Karen Matthews glanced at Vanessa's boarding pass, then at the officer. Without even looking closely, she dismissed Vanessa's concerns. "The officer is following protocol," she said with a casual tone. "There's no issue here." But Vanessa wasn't about to back down. "You're saying that his behavior is justified. Are you really going to stand here and allow this?" The supervisor, now clearly uncomfortable, shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "We follow protocols, and sometimes passengers are randomly selected for additional screening." "Random?" Vanessa asked, her voice steady, but her words laced with skepticism. "If this is random, why has every other first-class passenger passed through without question?" A few heads turned at the growing tension. Vanessa's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the increasing discomfort of the officers. It was clear that something wasn't right. Reynolds, feeling threatened by Vanessa's assertiveness, scoffed. "If you think you're being discriminated against, maybe you should just leave." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. "I'll speak to your supervisor about your behavior. I'm not going anywhere." The confrontation continued to escalate, with Officer Reynolds' harsh words getting louder, his frustration becoming more palpable. In that moment, Vanessa realized this wasn't just about her. It was about setting a precedent. It was about showing the world that no matter the challenges, no matter the discrimination, standing up for what's right was the only way forward. The supervisor, finally aware that things were getting out of hand, hesitated before trying to intervene. "Let's just calm down, please." But Vanessa wasn't calming down. She wasn't backing away. And the world watching her wouldn't either. The truth of the moment hung in the air. This wasn't about protocol. It was about prejudice, and Vanessa was no longer going to let it slide unnoticed. What happened next would have an irreversible impact, not just on Officer Reynolds, but on everyone who witnessed the injustice. And they would soon realize just how wrong they were to make assumptions about the woman standing before them. As the confrontation continued, Vanessa felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who had ever been unfairly judged, for everyone who had been silenced by the weight of prejudice and assumption. Officer Reynolds had mistaken her quiet confidence for vulnerability, but now he was witnessing her strength, a strength rooted in purpose, not arrogance. "I need to speak to your supervisor," Vanessa repeated, her voice unshakable. The words had a finality to them. There was no backing down now. This wasn't just about a first-class ticket or an airport screening. It was about the human dignity that was being threatened by assumptions that had no place in today's world. The supervisor, Karen Matthews, who had once looked the other way, now hesitated. She knew that the situation was spiraling out of control, and yet she had done nothing to intervene until it was almost too late. Vanessa's insistence on fairness and equality was like a mirror that forced everyone around her to confront their own biases, those subtle, insidious prejudices that too often go unnoticed until they explode into something much larger. Karen finally called over a higher-ranking supervisor, and a crowd of airport staff gathered. They all recognized the significance of what was happening. This wasn't just another passenger complaint. It was a moment of truth, a moment when people had to choose whether they would uphold justice or turn a blind eye. The reality was clear. This officer's behavior was not about security, it was about power. And Vanessa wasn't going to let that slide. Within minutes, the higher-ups had been made aware of the situation. The air felt charged with anticipation, as though everyone around her had finally realized the gravity of the moment. And then, in a tone much calmer and with a deep sense of authority, the higher-ranking officer addressed Reynolds. "Officer Reynolds, we've received complaints. Your conduct here is unacceptable. You'll be reassigned immediately." The room fell silent, and Vanessa allowed herself a moment to breathe. The officer who had belittled her, who had assumed she didn't belong, was now being held accountable. The people who had witnessed the exchange, the ones who had been too afraid to speak out earlier, now understood the power of standing up. Vanessa had not just confronted injustice, she had sparked a change that rippled beyond the airport. As she walked away, a sense of peace settled within her. She knew this wasn't the end of her journey. There would be more battles, more challenges, more prejudice to confront. But in that moment, she had made a statement. She had shown the world that fairness and respect weren't privileges. They were rights that everyone deserved, regardless of their skin color, gender, or background. In the days that followed, the story of the encounter spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story, and discussions about prejudice, race, and authority filled conversations across social media. People from all walks of life shared their own experiences, stories of overcoming biases, and moments when they had stood up for what was right. Vanessa became a symbol of resilience, not because she had won that day, but because she had chosen to stand tall in the face of adversity. The most powerful message that emerged from this encounter was not about one officer's mistake. It was about the strength we all have when we choose to stand up for ourselves and others. It was a reminder that every person, no matter where they come from or what they've overcome, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And that, when we see injustice, it's our duty to speak up. Because silence only perpetuates the cycle. As Vanessa boarded her flight, the sun began to set over the horizon, casting a golden light across the runway. She looked out the window, knowing that her journey was far from over. The work she was doing in Sudan still awaited her. The lives she would touch still needed her. But now, her mission wasn't just humanitarian. It was a fight for equality, for justice, for the belief that no one should ever feel small or invisible. And that, she knew, was the most important work of all.